fantastic. Just let me know if you guys have me on audio right now. Fantastic, awesome. I'm just checking the latency as well. It should be pretty quick, so I'm just gonna do a 1, 2, 3, and when you guys hear 1, 2, 3, just give me a chat comment, just so I know how quick the comment is. Oh, perfect. Fantastic. That's actually a really good latency. So, finally got this to work. I do not usually record to YouTube. I usually just go live to Facebook. It's a lot quicker. I think I got everything sorted out. Hopefully you guys are seeing two cameras, and hopefully I can respond to the comments rather quickly. So it's more of a test, but I am working, and I wanted to try this out because I think it'll be actually fantastic for Patreon. It's good for YouTube, and I can share it to Facebook. So I do also like that I can see the comments in Ecamm. So I'm actually trying to connect Ecamm with YouTube and go live. So lots of things. I think you got it figured out. At least Krabuk can hear me. So let me know if the audio is good, if it's quiet or too loud. And once it's good, I think there's 5 people hanging out, so feel free to ask any questions. I am going to be working on some of the Kashyyyk stuff tonight, and so I'm excited to show you that stuff. So let me just maybe walk through what it is that I have done. First and foremost, let me grab the big piece. So this is the actual tree right here, if you guys can see all that on camera, and I'll try to bring it down to the lower camera. Let me go back here so you can see. This is my hand just for scale, and you can see how ginormous this thing is. So this is actually what I'm working on. You say it's a little bit quiet based on the opening music. Let me just see if I can fix that. I'd like to adjust everything, and that way hopefully it gets to be a little bit better for you guys. Let me just try that out. Maybe if I'm here, is that any clearer for you? And if it's not, I can always turn up my mic volume as well. Just waiting for a comment to come back. Anyone else in chat can also let me know if you guys can hear that a little bit better. Okay, let me see if I can make it even nicer. All right, let me try that, see if that's any better for you. I upped it a little bit. I want to make sure that it's not too loud for you guys, and hopefully, okay, Paul's saying sound is good. Krabuk, let me know if it's any better for you. I do appreciate you guys working through the test here with me as well. So I'll just keep chatting. So basically what I'm doing is I'm building the pieces for the tree right now, or pieces that go around the tree. So what I have these small, I'm just going to adjust this camera up a little bit. There. So I have these pieces that I have made. They're covered over with a paper mache, kind of to give them a hide-like covering, and they're going to go in the water. They're going to come out of these cups, obviously. They're going to sit, and they're going to be the stilts that are out in the water, and there's going to be several of them. I have a few here. And so they're just at the initial stages right now. Hide coverings on, I have to do some woodwork on them, and then obviously I have to do some painting. So those things that I have. Too much gain. All right, let me just turn the gain down a little bit, and maybe that's better. No, I appreciate the nitpicking, because then when I get it, I don't have to worry about changing the settings. So those pieces I have been working on. In addition, I'm building some other smaller features, and everything's going to look really, really crude right now, but I trust in the end it'll look a little bit better. This is a piece that I'm also working on. So this is a small hut piece. It's actually going to go off the side of the tree. And so it's actually built out of a couple things. It's got some foam discs, some other foam discs. This is actually a spray bottle. So it's cut. You can see the gradient markings. This is actually going to go against the tree, so you won't see that. And then I have two funnels. They're different sizes, and then that's going to form the piece. So if you're familiar with Kashyyyk, or if you want to Google it, you'll know kind of what this piece is that I'm building here. It's going to have some pieces coming off the bottom, and it's going to have a cool sort of textured roof as well. So that is another piece I'm working on. I'm also working on a platform. So this is a platform that's going to go high up into the tree itself. This tab is just because it goes around the branches. So these cutouts are all going around the branches. Then it's actually going to have a piece that goes on like this. And that's actually going to be the piece I'm going to work on tonight. So I'm going to start cutting some of the platform, some of the window coverings that are going to be here. And then the piece that goes around here, that's actually going to be a walkway, and that's going to have some bamboo skewers covering that, and that's going to really fit in line with the pieces that I'm going to show you in a second that are a little further along but kind of have the same look. This one's actually going to go very high up in the treetop, and it's going to have, and also a piece I'm going to work on here in a second, it's going to have a roof. It has one layer here, and then the second layer goes there, and then the third layer of the roof is actually going to be that. So you can, let me lower this down again. So that's actually going to be what that one's going to look like. So you can quickly see that it starts to look like something, even though really it's a piece of plastic, a funnel, a dog food dish, a piece of foam core, and a larger funnel. So it's all going to look like something in the end. And I know probably everyone is laughing right now who is watching. Currently, I have no idea how many people. I'm just going to give my mouse a little shake here. There is 9 whole people watching, so fantastic. I know it's a little bit later in the evening. Took me a little while to get everything going, but so all these found objects, you're going to laugh. You think they aren't going to work in conjunction, but let me just show you this. This is actually a piece that's a little farther along, and so this is actually one of the platforms. So it has the hide covering on the bottom, and I showed some live videos on how I did some of that. So it's got the covering on the bottom. There's a design shaped into that. You guys can see that. And then on the top, it has the skewers. It has the first couple layers of paint. It's not done. It also has a covering. Let me just bring that closer to the camera. I guess you can't really see that one there, but it's got some hide coverings on the side, and the top is just made out of the exact same skewers. Now this is actually made out of a piece of plastic card on the bottom. This is just construction paper, basically packing paper on the bottom as well, covering that. Shish kebab or skewers that you buy at the dollar store. And then the main frame is actually a stove cover, so a metallic stove cover that you just put on a regular like element stove. So those all tied together, we start off with things like this, and then we end up with things like this. And when it's all said and done, it will look a little bit better than this as well. So that is another thing that we're working on. I have 2 of those actually done right now, and I'll bring the tree back up here momentarily, and I'll show you kind of what some of that stuff's going to look like. And I have a lot of objects on here, and we'll try to make some room. So let me just set these aside for a second. And feel free to ask any questions, or if I'm going too quickly and you want to see something again, obviously I can show you that as well. So we bring the tree, I can get it under the lights, back up here onto the table. Let me just angle this around. There we go. So you can see these little cutouts right here. And these won't stay by themselves, but these actually fit. Let me switch my hands around here. There we go. These actually go into the tree like so, and you can see how they're sort of elevated, hanging off the tree in this sort of suspended look. We're going to do some ladders, and we're going to do some connecting ramps and things between these ones. Effectively, these two bamboo platforms are going to make up the surface area that the bottom of the tree covers. So this is going to be on a skirmish table, and I wanted to make sure that we could interact with the tree, at least at the lower portions. And by doing so, we're able to basically reclaim the playable space that the bottom of the tree takes up. So hopefully that makes sense. Let me know in chat if that all translated well enough onto camera for you guys. Not to make you guys work, but I do appreciate that if I can at least know if it's translating well for you guys. So that's kind of what that looks like. If I bring let me just set a chair over here, and I'll kind of work a little bit off camera. This piece is so big, it's really difficult to translate this well onto here. But if I go there, yeah, that'll work. So you guys can sort of see the treetop here. Let me rotate the tree this way. There. So this is actually the top portion of the tree, and again, you can see my hand, so it's a fairly large piece. Thanks, Paul, for the translation there. The piece that I showed you earlier, what this does here is it actually plugs down into, let me just make sure I orient this correctly. It plugs down into the treetop like so. And there we go. So that's actually going to be where that goes. Yes, sorry, Paul. This is, I didn't specify. This is for Star Wars Legion, and this will be for a skirmish size, so a 3x3 table. So the tree is going to be pretty commanding on that space. So this is where the platform goes. Now, if I rotate it again, you can see that the funnel is extending down here. So it's a nice overhang, gives the tree a little bit more of a girth at the top. Then what's going to happen is the piece is going to go here. This is going to be the housing. And so we have the walkway that goes all the way around the tree. This piece here swings up, but I have it just down just so that I can actually get it to go around the treetop. The roof then goes on here, followed by the roof cap that goes on there. Now, the tree itself is going to have a canopy over it. So I have these two pieces of treetop here level with the roof. They're going to be magnetized, and the tree canopy is actually going to kind of fill out around some of the roofing. So it's going to kind of protrude through some openings. There's two other portions back here, and what I'm going to do is have the canopy probably in 3 different sections magnetized, so you can remove the canopy. When it's under the camera, it's pretty close to the overhead cam, so I'm going to remove that for play recording. However, when it's on the tabletop and you're playing on a standard table that doesn't have an overhead cam, you're definitely going to be able to play around the bottom portion of this build. So that's kind of what's in the works. So there's several pieces going on at the same time. In addition, there's going to be a few other trees featured on here. I have a number of these very tall pines. They're going to be kind of used in the backdrop just to kind of do some undergrowth and fill that in. Yeah, let me just slide that comment over, Paul. I can't quite see the end of that. Okay, so Paul says, how did you plan out the playability of the table, making sure that the units can move and hide in the map freely? Okay, so specifically the table, I was less concerned about the upper canopy and more concerned about the bottom portion. So those first 2 platforms that I showed you, like I said, I wanted to basically reclaim any of the space that the bottom of the tree took up. So these are a little bit more than the bottom of the tree, and they're going to be accessible from the bottom portion. So there will be some movement requirements to get up here. but I wanted to make sure that the two spaces were going to be relatively close to the middle, so there was not really any distinct advantageous side to take. The tree itself is large enough, and it has a nice curvature to the tree. Again, a little difficult to show you in this particular angle, but I made the tree in such a way that it actually goes up and then angles, and so that no matter which angle you approach the tree on, it's very easy to reach in and around, and the distance from the bottom of the tree to where you're really going to have any other features, meaning the top of the tree, is open. So the two platforms kind of sit lower than eye level, and this is a very high table that I'm playing on. This is kind of why it doesn't really translate well to this camera. It's more for showing you things here. But when you're playing, although it's going to be kind of in the middle, you and your opponent can really eye each other up, and you can have a conversation without necessarily having to have a huge tree in the way. So if you're on either side of the center, it's fine. So truthfully, when I planned it out, I really wanted to incorporate the bottom portions being the most playable, and the upper portions really just sort of developed as I was doing the build. I don't see the upper portion. It's probably, like, to be quite honest, it would be like height 6 or 7. So it's not really going to translate to actual gameplay. It would be much more scenario based, or if players wanted to agree about deployment up there or things like that. It's very much more for photographing and sort of skill testing and showing how-tos on certain elements. But to make it a playable thing, because ultimately we want to play the game on it as well, really truthfully, only the two bottom pieces are going to be things that players are going to need to interact with. So it was quite easy to plan that out. And then the upper portion is all just kind of eye candy and extra bits and pieces that I want to sort of test some skills on and do some really cool elements at the top. So again, the playability of that doesn't have to worry too much. I did make the walking platform around wide enough to put a couple figs on, but again, that's more for photographing and more aesthetics. But good question around playability and planning. Another piece that I'm not really going to talk about tonight, but if you follow the build, it's going to have a water element, and so I'm going to have some beach on it. I'm going to have the beach basically be like a low surf, so very maybe knee-high water, that sort of stuff, something that if you have to deploy on that edge of the table, it's not unrealistic to think that your guys could be walking and sort of storming the beaches, if you will, on one edge of the table. So it's going to be very limited in terms of the water feature. I'm going to have a little bit kind of coming in, just as a little jetty coming in. But again, that's just going to be low surf, low tide, and I'm going to have a sandy beach just incorporated into that. I wanted to have some open space as opposed to filling it all with a huge tree. And so I have a nice balance between this massive feature and then some open space that can be maybe changed and manipulated with barricades, as opposed to the tree that's not going to be an element that you can move. So that's all sort of the planning that I had incorporated into this particular build. But let me just give me 1 second here. I'm just going to plug in my glue gun so we can actually get started with a couple small things. I'm going to be doing, like I said, a little bit of plastic card work here on camera. I'm going to be working on getting these rooftop pieces a little bit more permanent, and then I can start getting some roof designs done as well. So if you have any other questions, though, feel free to ask. I don't mind answering any of those things. I have lots of pieces to put together here over the coming days, and I do need to do a little bit more paper mache work. I was talking about these platforms earlier. You can see here that I have one finished and one unfinished. What I did is I started off by doing large strips coming over the top, and that gave me my basically my shape. Then what I did is I went and did a top layer, and so I've just tore the paper to look kind of like hides. A lot of this will get covered, but I wanted to have that sort of consistent hide-like covering, and then I need to do that on the edges as well. So it's basically a 3-part process, just based on I wanted to have the gravity of the glue sort of drip off, so I can't do the sides and the top because then there's no nice way to set this. So I did the edges, then I did the top, then I did the bottom portion. So I have one more of those to do, but sort of like to skip around because it gets a little bit tedious working on the same sort of elements. Time after time. So I give myself a little bit of time to work through that. Just going to quickly bring up a reference photo here that I'm going to be working with, just so I can incorporate that into my my plan here tonight. So any other questions, like I said, just feel free, and we'll get going. Just got to let this glue gun heat up here a little bit. There's tons of great photos. The internet is a wonderful place. So like I said, if you go looking for some Kashyyyk stuff, I was surprised at the wealth of pictures that I could find, and really cool artist renditions, and video game references, and there's just a ton of really cool stuff. I was unaware of how vast the Kashyyyk planet was in terms of reference, but it's been really cool just looking at all the designs, going through and finding each time I look for another photo, I find another element that I want to add, and something that I want to make, change up a design or add a little bit to it. It's been really cool. It's basically like giant tree forts is what these sort of translate into. I am just at my computer here for 1 second, just looking up a reference photo, so please don't disappear. Here, I'm going to turn my other microphone on here and just see if you guys can. You guys should be able to be hearing me on this microphone too. If you guys want to give me a sound check on, hey Martin, how's it going? If you guys want to give me a sound check on this second microphone, that would be awesome as well. So I have one set up here at the computer, and then I have one set up at the build station. So be great to know if you guys are picking me up on both microphones, if it's echoey at all, or any of that stuff. I would love to know. Check and check. Fantastic. Thanks, John. Always great when a little echo. Okay, let me just see if I can. Let me just turn the other microphone down quite a bit and see if that works. And if not, I have one other thing to try. So just trying to... there we go. This is the item that I was looking for. Let me just try something really fun and interesting. Let me know if I fix that echo, guys. If not, I have an idea. Perfect. Awesome. Fantastic. Let me just go into Ecamm here. I want to see if I can do one other thing live with you guys right now, and see if I can do a real quick screen share with you guys. That is not what I'm trying to show you. I want to actually show you that, but let me just see if that works for you guys. I'm just going to go into... Let me know if you guys are seeing some Kashyyyk inspired images. Just trying to do a few tests here, but I thought a little visual reference would be a little bit easier to show you guys. If you guys are seeing Kashyyyk images, let me know. If you are not, then that's a problem. Okay, perfect, awesome. All right, things are seemingly going great. All right, let me just walk you really quickly through. So if you guys are looking at this image right here, there should be, and let me just go back in Ecamm here. You do not need to see my other camera. let me just make that a little bit smaller here right now. So if you're looking at Ecamm, the pieces that you're looking at right there, that's actually some of the huts that I'm trying to work on. So this piece right here, that is the one that we're going to be working on. We're going to be working on these window sections right there. If I slide over here, let me just go in a bit more. This little guy right here is, let me slide out a little bit. This is the one that I was showing you earlier about the platforms. I guess it's not quite cooperating there. So this one right here is the bell-shaped one, and that's going to go off the side of the tree. So there's lots of cool inspiration. This is the window sections that we're going to work on right now. So I'm going to bring you back into Ecamm. We're going to slide back over. I'm going to leave that reference up here on the screen, but I am going to stop sharing my screen with you at this moment. And just go back to showing you guys the cameras themselves. All right, so we're going to hopefully get out of this. I'm going to, sorry, I'm just trying to figure out how to show you what I wanted to show you. Oh, the joys, the joys. Go back here. I just want to stop sharing my screen with you. And we'll go back to camera. Ah, perfect. There we go. That's what I want to have a look at. So, sorry about that, folks. Just a little glitch in terms of figuring out how YouTube works relative to Ecamm. All right, so let's go over to, I'm going to up the other microphone back up and mute that one. Fantastic. There's also only one of me, and I'm unfortunately away from my computer, so usually I'm behind the computer. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to first get these rooftop sections done, and then we're going to actually start taking some plastic card and we're going to start laying it across the sides here. So what we want to do is the windows that I showed you before, we're going to start building those out along the side here. And I'm going to do this completely live, and so you're going to see the working, the gears spinning, and hopefully no smoke coming off or out the ears. But before we do that, I do want to get this this roof section done. So in order to create these, effectively what I do is I cut a circle out of plastic card or styrene. So if you're not familiar with that, it's usually at any sort of hobby store. This stuff here that I'm using is 1 mil thick, so it's a little bit on the thicker side. Typically I'll work with like 0.5 mil, 1 mil, 1.5 mil. Any thicker than that, it's pretty structural. Any thinner than that, it's more of a veneer. So I'll actually probably work with some 1 mil and start there to see if I can get it to conform to this shape well enough. Effectively what we're going to do is we're going to cut rectangular patterns. We're going to cut out the window, and then we're going to add some pieces on, but I'll probably just do the window and the panel sections first, finish that off, and then start worrying about the extra adornments and things like that. But I do want to get the roof in place, just dry fit, just so that I can make sure that I have enough clearance and how high I need to go up on this side section. So my glue gun is nice and warm. I can smell it burning here. So these glue guns I've had for a super long time. I have 2 of them. I'm glad I bought 2 of them. They've really been amazing workhorses. They're actually cordless, which is fantastic, and they hold temperature quite a bit. They do have a temperature gauge on it, but it's kind of like analog. You got to look at it. I do have a low temp glue gun, but for this plastic card, I'll typically use high temperature. And so what you do is you cut out the circle that you want, the size that you need. You cut out your wedge. The wedge is going to allow me to fold this into sort of a cone. And what I'm going to do is basically pinch this together, put a bead of glue on the back side of it, so in the cone, and then I'm just going to let that solidify. and any excess that squeezes out the top, I'll trim that with a knife. The inside stuff I don't care about. I will a little bit though, because it is going to have to lay flush on here, so I may have to do a little bit of trimming. And then once it's solidified, it should be quite strong structurally. Another thing that I often do is I take a piece of tape, either painter's tape or masking tape, doesn't really matter, and I put this on the top side so that when I squeeze this together, it does two things. A, it keeps my glue from squirting out onto the top side where I'm going to have to trim it, and it also allows me to get a little bit of, it's almost like a third hand. It just allows me to bond the plastic together a little bit easier. So I'm going to push that there. I'm going to run my tape. It's going to hold. Squeeze that together, and then we're going to get a good bond. So here we go. So put that on there, and then I want to move it out of the way and squeeze that together, and I just have to hold. So great time for question if you have one. It's not going to take me a long time to hold this, but I temporarily have nothing to show you as I'm holding this. As I said, this is all live, so you'll have to bear with some of the nuances of terrain making. Hopefully the microphone is turned back up enough for you guys to hear me as well. So all right, so I'm just going to run my finger along that just to smooth that out a little bit. There we go. Just taking some of the excess off. Just going to check that bond. Yeah, it's not too bad. All right, so it's got a little bit more flex, so I'm going to put a little bit more glue just there. I'm going to flex that back down. And I'm going to run my finger over this real quickly. It's just to keep it tapped down a little bit. And then I'll do a little bit of a super glue bond as well once I get this really flattened out. It's got a lot of tension, so it's going to want to spring back quite a bit. The smaller it is, the more tension it has. The larger one will be a little bit easier. The yellow thing, is it a dog bowl? Absolutely it is. You better believe it. Right there. $2 dog dish. Gonna turn this into a Wookiee hut. A very large Wookiee hut. Okay, now what I'm going to do is, while that's held on the bottom end, I'm going to take a little bit of gap filling glue, run a bead down, give it a squeeze, some accelerant, and again just squeezing that together. Grab a piece of paper towel. Need to have lots of hands when you're making terrain. Alright. Just going to scrape out as much excess hot glue as I can on the back side. What is the worst you've ever glued yourself? I haven't had any really bad glue stories. Personally, I can tell you somebody who has glued themselves quite badly here in the studio. I won't mention his name. I won't say it specifically. It's Jeff M. or Jay McNary. However, I don't want to give his full name away, but so he once glued his, I want to say pinky and ring finger together, pretty much the entirety of the finger. And it took us a good 20 minutes, 30 minutes to work through. We had to use nail polish remover. We did a really, not really a surgery, but kind of like a surgery. It wasn't exceptionally painful, but we were a little bit worried that we were going to lose some skin. We ended up not losing very much skin at all, and he was perfectly fine. But it was fairly comical. Then it was like a little bit serious, and then it was kind of comical, and now it's comical again to share the story. So if you're out there, Jay McNary or Jeff M, whichever you go by, great story. So. I'm just going to quickly grab a sanding stick because I don't think I have one here, and I'll be right back. All right, so I'm just going to give this a little bit of a sand. Put a little bit more gap filling glue in here just to really solidify. This is going to get a covering over the entire thing, so really don't need to pay too much attention to the line, but I want to have a really solid bond because you can see how this wants to flex up. Once it's glued down to the next piece, it'll have even more strength, and we'll see that in a few minutes here. But I just want to try to take as much flex out of this as I can, and when it's flexed down, I can fill that gap. So, are you using a special kind of glue for the plastic card? No, I just really like, so this is Bob Smith's Industries gap filling glue. It's a 5 to 15 second one, but I use the accelerant, as you can see, because I don't have 5 seconds to wait clearly. I use mostly all Bob Smith Industries. There's a really thin, sorry, I had just a terrain question coming through here, and I thought it was a YouTube comment. There's a really thin version of this as well, and I have a funny glue story about that since Paul has asked about that stuff. I sometimes will use that if I need to, after I've glued pieces together and I find that there's a little vaulting, maybe there's a bubble or a lift in some of the plastic card. I'll often lift it up, use that glue, let that wick in. It's like really, really thin, thinner than water, and it runs in, and I use that to do sort of repairs, but primarily I use the purple stuff. It's the gap filling. I like that one the best. So let me tell you the other story about glue. And so we were playing a game here. Again, not to give anybody's name away, but it was Jace P or Jay Pippin, whatever he goes by. And we were playing a game, and he happened to have a fig that just came dislodged from the base, and so he asked me if I had any glue. Of course, I have a lot here, and I wasn't really paying attention in terms of like pointing out the specific glue that he should use, but I pointed him to the glue area, and there's lots of glue bottles there. So he happened to grab the blue one. Take the glue and go to glue the fig down. Now, like I said, it's thinner than water, and so he proceeded to get the glue all over the model, all over the table, all over his hands, and in his efforts to kind of quickly clean it up, not realizing how quickly it dried, it glued the base and the model to the table. So much so that we took a hammer to smash the base off the table. Subsequently, the figure went flying. We had to re-glue that for a second time, but we needed a hammer to actually dislodge the base from the table. He had that much glue out, so it was about a $17 worth of glue used to glue one fig. So it's not the most optimal. Highly recommend not doing that. And if you ever happen to grab that stuff, be careful. The blue bottle is very, very thin, so please read your glue labels. So we now have this guy here fixed. Like I said, it's going to get glued to this, It's going to go down in a pattern like this, so over the top. So it's going to have lots of adherence. It's going to be a little bit vaulted though, so like I said, I didn't really care about the glue under here. It's going to be a little bit elevated, and that's going to allow our cladding to go underneath, and then have a little bit of a vault here. So we're going to set this one aside. We're going to do the same thing to this guy. I've already pre-taped this one here though. So I'm going to heat that up just a little bit more because it's a little bit cool. And so we got the gap filled in here. Like I said, it's really wanting to pull apart. It's not too bad. I got it sanded, I think about as good as I'm going to get it. And we're going to put some this material here actually. So this is a craft paper. It's corrugated. I buy it like this. It's just convenience. I'm not sure if I have a price tag on here. This one's just called corrugated paper. It's in the craft section or the scrapbooking section. If you wanted to make this yourself, if you take a corrugated box and you peel apart the two layers, you'll get two pieces. The only problem with that is sometimes you'll get the paper that sticks on one side or another, so it's not really consistent. This one ends up being really consistent, obviously, and it doesn't matter about the color. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut little strips like this. So this is two pieces, and I'm going to end up gluing them to the piece here. So it's actually going to be glued coming up here, and that's going to create the little bit of skirting that goes around. So let me just hold that up to the overhead cam. You guys can see that a little bit clearer there. So, and I just put the 22mm lens on here tonight. I have a zoom lens, but again, I was just messing around with, truthfully, the angle. So typically I have it a little bit more zoomed in. So my apologies if it's not as tight of an angle. It certainly can be in the future videos. Again, just mostly testing. So this is going to get layered over here, and I'll basically walk that around in concentric circles. It's not going to be it's going to be a little bit tricky to angle it up to a single point, but the nice thing about this one is it only has to go up as high as the cone going over the top. And because the cone's going over the top, that's going to just allow me to have a little bit more leeway in terms of running these pieces up. So I don't really need to have them all go to a point. I only need to have them go up about that far. Likewise with this one here, it's only going to need to go up a similar distance, just up enough to cover the cone. So it's just going to be like that, and then I'll start again. So that's kind of and you can see the sort of profile that I'm getting there. This is going to be elevated just a little teeny bit, probably about a ½ inch, just to kind of give it the look that's on the actual Kashyyyk table. So okay, so I think the glue gun is probably hot enough. Let's do this again. As I said, this one's a lot easier. You can see I can just hold it with tape. I don't even need hands. It doesn't have as much pressure on it. So I'm going to walk this through. Can make this one a little bit cleaner because, again, I don't need as much glue. Put that down, pull the glue gun out. Just going to press this in. Let that hold. Any more questions, keep them coming. If you want to know about products, another slight downside of coming over here to film is my actual art studios on the other side. So this is more where we game and where we kind of podcast. So I do often have to run back and forth just because I only have limited space here. So if you are interested in something and I need to run, just bear with me while I do that. Okay, so that is that. I'm just going to pull this tape off. There we go. Not bad, not bad. Just going to flex that down a little bit. It's got a little bit of a lip that I would love to have gone. Let's see if I can flex out that lip. I suppose that's not too bad. I'm just going to run my knife along this just to shade this a little bit. I'm sure that sounds fantastic. My apologies if that was loud. All right, there we go. Fantastic. That's going to look very, very nice. Okay, so those pieces are, as I said, going to go there. We'll line when we're putting it into the tree, what I'll end up doing is I'll end up aligning both those seams so that they are easy for me to hide. It'll also probably face into the tree, so it'll be the least visible space. But hopefully you guys are starting to see the profile and what we're exactly looking at. So if I'm looking at the underside of this, looks like I can go almost right up to the top. There is a little bit of a flat portion there. I'll probably leave that as a point of connect, and if I need to cover that over, because probably get a little bit of a glue build up there, just basically joining the dog food dish to the roof. We'll worry about that later, and we can either cover that over with some stripping, or we can cover that over with some wrapping. So that is not really going to be a point of consideration for us. At least it's not going to be a point of frustration for us. Okay, so just checking, see if people were still hanging out or if I was just talking to myself there, which is also perfectly acceptable. All right, let me just keep this clear. Try to keep a little bit of a clear space, even though I have fairly limited room here with all the goodies that I brought to show you. Okay, so what we're gonna do is work with some styrene. Just have some sheets here. Now, styrene, oftentimes, if you're finding it's made by a company, or primarily made by a company, Wintergreen or Evergreen plastics, they typically come in like a 7x9 sheet, so fairly small, but like this. I have sourced out, so I buy these in 4x8 sheets now. They're considerably cheaper when you buy them in large quantities, so much so that a little 7x9 is typically about $7 Canadian, $8 Canadian. I'm buying 4x8 sheets for around $40, and so it works out to be way less than it's like 25% of the cost for me. And I go through a lot of it, so it's nice to be able to find it somewhat economical. So one of the things, though, that being said, typically what I want to do is I want to create a paper template, or do something that's going to give me a little bit of a consistent and replicatable piece. So what I'm going to go do is grab a piece of paper, and I'm going to lay the paper out and see if I can make a paper template first, so that I can translate that over the plastic card. I'm going to grab a thin piece of plastic card, because typically what I do is I do a paper template into a thin piece of plastic card, making sure that it conforms here, and then I move that over to whatever piece I'm going to use as my actual structural element. So again, just give me 5 seconds. All right, so I have some thin plastic card right here, and we're going to just cut out a small piece of paper. And we got a pen and a ruler. So let's just cut ourselves out a little section of paper, and then we'll get going with our template. So this plastic card here, again, similar size sheets. You can see I cut lots of circles out of this one. Very, very thin, so you can see kind of how ripply it is versus this one here, which is far more stiff. So this one's only about 1/3 of a millimeter, so about 1/3 the thickness of the one I'm actually going to be using. So I'm just going to set this aside for now. Grab my piece of paper, which I set here. Fantastic. And then we're going to grab our dog food dish, and then we're going to start laying out kind of what that's going to look like. So we have a little bit of a weird angle here. The dog food dish has got this sort of beveled edge. So I'm really not nice to myself. I like to work with all kinds of weird shapes. And so because of that, you have to be quite cognizant of, will your material conform to the space that you're working in? What sort of allowances do you have to have? How big of a panel can you make? What's the best angle of approach for this? Do I want to have this curvature? The actual piece is angled, so I'm going to be really easy on myself, and we're actually just going to make angled pieces. So we're going to come at it from this sort of angle. If we're top down, we're going to account for that. We're going to make up that vaulting area. We still have attachment points top and bottom, so I'm not concerned about the glue element, but it doesn't have this curvature to the piece. This was just a really nice thing to use. It was a little bit difficult to find an exact fit for that, so that's what we're going to try to do anyway. So because of that, it's going to be relatively simple in shape and design. We do have to now figure out too, how many pieces are we going to have go around? How many sections? We may have to, I believe there's a door or an opening. So what I'm probably going to do is come up with something that's relatively nice in size. I also want to account for the window. So maybe around, the window looks like it's a little farther up. So maybe we'll try like 3 inches and see roughly what that equates to. So I'm just going to quickly measure out a 3-inch piece here. So again, you're just going to see kind of this just live working. What can we come up with? Sure if you guys are catching on the overhead. Yeah, a little bit, I guess. Okay, there we go. Let's check our top measurement, see if we're fairly close to 3 inches. Great, it's almost like we measured something. Fantastic. Okay, so now that being said, let's cut this. I'm lazy, I don't want to use scissors, and so I'm just going to use my knife. Get rid of, I was talking the other night about getting rid of scraps. Get rid of scraps because sometimes they stick around and then they almost look like a piece that you needed, and then you'll use it and it's the wrong piece, or it's just a little bit smaller, or it's an extra one. It just ends up being kind of a cluttery area if you keep it at. So I generally just get rid of them. Now I have to reach my head down in the way, and I'm going to look there and see what that kind of looks like. All right, so 3 inches, is that too wide? It looks a little bit wide now that I have it on there, so I'm maybe thinking that 3 inches is too big. So I'm going to cut this down another 1/2 inch. You know what? I'm just going to use the ruler and just go with whatever measurement that is. I talk about using known measurements a lot, meaning you just use objects and the object doesn't change, so you don't even have to worry about numbers or aligning things. It's that size. It's the size of that object, and I really like that because I find it speeds up building a lot. Okay, I like this size a lot better. I can already tell. So I'm just aligning that to the bottom. I just want to roughly figure out what the angle is going to look like. Got to keep it nice and straight-ish. All right, I'm going to use that measurement there. Just going to cut that and see how close we are. Again, this is paper, so I can make as many mistakes as I want. It's not really costly. It's, I mean, pennies. And then what I'm going to do is just grab 2 pieces of quick tape because I like to dry fit and I like to look at things visually a lot. And so I don't usually do a ton of live builds because it's not really that interesting to most people. But some people are interested, so this is for those people. So I'm just going to quickly align that to the bottom, roughly where it needs to go. My apologies if my head is in the way. Just going to wrap that there. I wasn't paying attention if there's any questions. Here we go. Why are you not using the dish and cut? So that is a good question. The consistency of cutting into this bowl, I was a little bit worried about. This is a pretty thick plastic. Even though it's a cheap bowl, it's a thicker plastic. And to consistently cut into this, I was a little bit concerned that I actually wouldn't be able to make it uniform enough. And again, cutting into the beveled edges, I was worried about the measurements being precise enough. So I think I like this method better, and here's why. I can cut it in panels, and if I make a mistake on any one panel, I can just simply replace that. But if I make one mistake cutting into the plastic, then I'm forced to probably replace this. So that's a $2 mistake, and I can only make it so many times because obviously, well, currently I can't get any of them because I can't go shopping. But it's a $2 mistake every time I do that. And with the panel, it's, you know, a few pennies mistake, and then I can easily replace that one if need be. So that was kind of my logic there. Your logic is also sound. It's just that's the rationale that I came up with, and so that's the method that I decided to go with. So if you're looking at this here on the side, let me just angle this a little bit on the top. You can see basically, let me put my hand underneath the vault so you guys can see that. That's kind of the distance that I would make up there. So it has attachment points top and bottom. Profile wise, it'll be a little bit hard to see. Let me come to the 22 mil one here, and you guys can kind of see how it still has that nice profile, that angled profile. And I have the ability now to cut the window. The window's also going to have a little bit of a vault in behind it. So it's going to give me the depth of, or the illusion of depth, because it's going to have a vaulted space in behind. And so if I paint that out black, it will look quite consistent, I think. So, but that's only one. So let's just quickly jump over to the thinner plastic and do a quick test over here. Let me see if we actually had any sort of, you know what, it ended up being 2 inches precisely. So we lucked out in the fact that it's also a known measurement as well as a mathematical measurement. So now we're just going to jump over here onto the hello dog who's coming over here to shake on camera. Let's just jump over to the plastic card. I'm going to quickly measure off some space here. There's 2, there's 4, there's 6. Let's try to cut 3 of these panels. And then we're going to quickly measure up here. I need to have, don't have my other backing ruler, 1 second. Just want to make sure that I get a nice flush measurement here. Again, this is doesn't have to be exceptionally precise work for this because I'm sure the Wookiees, although they were master craftsmen, probably weren't overly concerned with having everything flush. Just want to check the height measurement on that. And so as a result, I'm just going to be fairly close. I'm going to cover a lot of it with cladding and materials and bamboo and things like that, and they're not going to be near as precise as doing actual measurements. But If I can start off with something fairly close, that'll go a long way to making it fit onto the bowl at least nicer. So I kind of like showing these videos in a way because a lot of people just get to see the finish and the polished work, and they don't necessarily realize how messy and non-precise it is when you start. So you only have to start getting precise on your final layers, the layer that you're going to see. It's like patching a hole in the wall. You can have the most grotesque hole in a wall ever. You know, somebody threw a brick through it, your foot went through it, somebody's head went through it, whatever. It's going to make a messy hole in your wall, and it's going to have gyprock or debris and boards exposed and all that sort of stuff. But then when you start adding your joint compound and your primer layer and then your final coat and maybe the wallpaper, all those things, you never actually know there was a hole there to start with. So I kind of look at terrain making like that. I'm using all the crappy materials here, and sometimes I use something a little bit more expensive, just depends. These were the objects that best work for this. But just because they're kind of cheap or crappy or, not what you might think, doesn't mean that they're not going to be the best item for the job. And it doesn't mean when you get it all finished that wallpaper that you put over the outside isn't going to make it look spectacular. And so often people don't get to see this stuff. So I do enjoy sharing this part just precisely for that. You guys can see that things don't all start off as, model kits. You got to make things. You can make them out of pretty cool stuff, though. Like dog food dishes. All right, so I actually cut this. I actually didn't put this on the thinner one. Whatever, I already measured it. So I cut this on the thicker one. I actually wasn't paying attention, but we'll go with it. If it's not awesome, well, we'll consider it a loss, but it should be okay. I'm also cutting 3 panels at once here, just to see if there's any efficiency in cutting 3 at a time. It may be able to be flexed around. If it is, that's great. If not, you got to do a panel at a time. That's also fine. If not, I can just cut off the part that doesn't work, and we can go from there. I often talk about cutting with plastic card. Depending on the thickness, I usually use about 2 cuts per half mil. So this is a mil thick, 4 cuts to kind of get through there. So fair enough. Sorry, Martin, I'm not paying close enough attention to the chat here. I'm not sure that my dogs are really fussy. So she's got like a much fancier water dish that's constantly dispensing water. And I don't know if she'd drink out of this one. She's kind of like that. So I think she just really wanted to come over here and make noise. They love when the camera's on. That's the time that they want to make the most noise. Otherwise, they're fairly quiet. Unless somebody comes here, and then they're loud and obnoxious and all that stuff. All right, so okay, so let me set that aside there. And let's jump over to the dog food dish, whichever one we want to use. Okay, so not bad. Just going to try to face the camera here. The only problem I'm going to see is the flex. If you go too long, it's flared up on the corners right here, just because it doesn't conform to the angles as nice. So I'm going to have to make it in the actual hut. It's more of like I don't know how many sides it is, but it's definitely more angular shaped. It's not doesn't look rounded. It actually has cleating in between each panel. So I'm probably going to have to do the same thing, because although I can flex it, I can't angle cut that, and I don't want to try to cut one big long strip. So that just tells me that I can't do that. I'm just going to trim. All right, so let's do this. Let's cut one of these. Again, I'm just going to use the paper template here. It's not super precise, but it works. There we go.
cut one of these and see. 1 for scoring, 2 for cutting, 3 for cutting, 4 for cutting. There we go. All right, so I'm just going to work upside down, even though it's going to go the other way. It's just a lot easier for me to work in the inverse because I can actually see where it connects on both portions here. So that's fairly decent. I'm just going to quickly cut another one just to make sure that it's going to work for us. This definitely was not 3 wide. Not exactly sure what I was measuring. This is only 2.5. Oh, that's because I said it was 2 inches and it was actually 2.5 inches. I even said 2 inches. One, 2, 3, 4. There we go. Let's make sure that those are approximately the same. They're not bad. I feel like there's a little bit of a angle difference here. That paper might not 100% be straight. Or maybe I'm just not cutting exactly straight. I'm going to fix this here now. Again, there we go. And then I'm just going to trim this to same size. I will not do all of them like this, because if you do all of them like this, they progressively get smaller and smaller and smaller. I'm just going to consider these 2 test pieces, and then I'll go back and take an actual measurement. Okay, there we go. So now I'm going to put 2 panels together, and you're going to see the challenge. And this was exactly what was happening with the flex. So you can see that because they have to still go in this circumference of the dog food dish, we're going to get some angling. Now, I have encountered this before when I made an indoor bunker, because when you have angle panels going up, you need to look at top and bottom sizes being slightly different. So now what we're going to do is we're going to see if we can come up with a very clever method of angling both sides so that they are a little bit different and fit together a little bit nicer. So we're going to work through this problem right now. So we're going to go with some guesstimations on this. I'm going to attempt to see if we can make this work. Truthfully, I should just be doing this in paper, but I've already cut these, so at this point, they're not really going to be much more than a template anyway. And I'm just going to cut one side, and if it doesn't work, cut the other, and then I'll have basically four chances at getting this angle about right. Okay, I got to remember as well that I'm going, this is the top, and this is the bottom. So you can already see that that's much closer. And I got to also keep in mind, do I want the top wider than the bottom or the bottom wider than the top? In this case, I do want it to angle up to the top. So that's why I have it inverted here. I'm just going to now see if I like this or not. Do I like this? Well, let's give it a go. We'll just try it and see if we like it. Just got to use my brain here for a second to make sure this is going to work. If I angle that the same, we'll give it a shot. You guys will have to bear through as I work through my musings here. I'm not 100% convinced this is going to look great, so I may have to rethink this a little bit. Martin's idea of cutting into the dog food dish sounds great. But if this... so there you can see, hopefully, there you can see that accounts for our, I guess I'm a little bit too close, that accounts for our gap there. So now we have effectively a panel that works there, and we can flex it a little bit around. So we'll get some conical or round, spherical, I guess, shape to this, because we will glue the top and the bottom together. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that when we're doing that, our angled sections also fit together. And this seemingly would suggest that it does. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut 2 more just to attempt to align these. And then I'm going to tack them on with glue so that I can give you guys a little bit more of a visual aspect in terms of what I'm actually doing here. So let me just quickly invert these, cut them. I'm going to cut 1 more, and then I'm going to kind of leave it at that so you guys can see this. I'm not going to do all this work on camera because it's going to be a lot of redundancy, and I'd like to avoid that. But what I will do is I will show you, before I jump off here, I will show you kind of what I was talking about for the cladding for this, just so you guys can get a couple things. So now that I have this operational, I will probably come back and do I said this month I was going to do a bunch of live stream videos, so I plan to do this. I wanted to try and see which platform is better. This allows me to have it directly to YouTube, which is fantastic. Just saves me a little bit of work. So that's why this is also more easily available for my patrons, and so they can kind of check that out. Which, by the way, is also all free content this month, and so. I don't want anyone to think this is a clever ploy to get people to check out the Patreon. I do encourage you to check it out if you like, but truthfully, I'm just making a bunch of content for people who are stuck home isolated, like myself, and just to kind of give you a little bit of something else to listen to and laugh at, all that good stuff. That one's cut. Excuse me. I heard a pop. What do we got going on? Yeah, Paul. Yeah, you're welcome, Paul. It's the least I can do. I can't really offer people anything else. I don't have a cure for coronavirus, but I can make content that's free for everyone. And I've run it by my patrons, and they thought it was a good idea, and so they are agreeable. So, all right, so that's that. I'm going to do 1 more, if you guys can bear with me, just because I think 3 is better than 2, just to overall show what's going on. I'm going to make it really simple, because I'm just going to cut it out using this one as a template. And again, these won't be the final pieces, so I'm going to be a little bit crude with the measurement here. Just give me a rough idea. I'm just using the thicker material again, just for consistency wise. It wouldn't really work if I switch to the thin stuff at this point. So you guys can quickly see though how you can chew through plastic card if you are not really knowing what you're doing. Same thing with planning out circles too. There's nothing worse for excess and waste material than cutting circles. This build has a ton of circles on it, very large ones. Actually, I should point out as well, just as I'm talking about that, another great soft material or softer, easier, and more affordable material is foam core. So this is actually a foam core disc here. This is a platform that I'm going to end up putting some skewers through. So slight aside here, by the way, this is how my brain works. So this is going to end up having skewers over the entirety of the surface. And so gluing the skewers to the plastic card was going to be fine. I was a little bit worried about the structural integrity over such a large space. So even the wand or the 2mm has a little bit more flex than the foam core. And also the ability to cut this flap that could go around the tree and then I could place back up and then easily seal over isn't as nice with plastic card. So here I'm using foam core. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to double bamboo skewer this. So I'm going to have one layer on the top, one layer on the bottom. And the reason being is, in looking at the design, what they have is outside of the perimeter of the walkway, there's this like weird extension, so it comes out and then there's a little bit of a gap and then a circular ring that goes around, like this metallic ring. And so what I figured was the foam core's got enough area, I can actually embed a skewer directly inside, so inside the foam core. So I'll have a top, bottom, and then one embedded, and then that'll extend out and give me the ability to create that round metallic ring. So okay, so yeah, so Martin's still suggesting that, and perhaps you are 100% correct. It is a lot of work to cut the panels. However, what you're really seeing is you're seeing me work through the template process, which is going to be a little bit more work than the actual cutting of the redundant panels. So cutting into this, I will 100% tell you is a little bit more of a challenge than it seems. This plastic does not lend very well to clean cutting. What it's going to do is it's going to splinter and it's going to crack. And so if you create any weak points in this, the potential for it to crack in the corners is very easy. The material that this is made out of is very similar to like what containers are made out of, like butter dishes and sour cream containers. And so what ends up happening with these is they tend to fracture in the corners, and then you'll get really large splits that run very, very quickly. Plastic card doesn't, or styrene doesn't have a tendency to do that. And so that's just one of my cautionary things around and why I'm hesitant to cut directly into this piece. So inevitably, it probably is a bit quicker. It would be a little bit less work than having to do the template work that I'm doing now. But inevitably, I think it'll be just as good, and there's more room for fixing errors later on that inevitably will happen. And I just don't want to get into a situation where I'm trying to fix the plastic on here. Not to disagree with your suggestion at all, Martin. I think it's quite valid. I guess it's just a comfort level, and you know what? If I had access to, I have 3 or 4 of these dishes, but if I had access to a few more, and if given that I make a mistake and I can run to the store and buy a couple more, I think that's fine. But in the interest of the fact that I can't do that, I think that's playing a little bit into the scenario right now as well. All right, so just laying this on here. A little bit of tab there. Okay. All right, so let me just tape this top and bottom. Typically painter's tape is my go-to, but I used quite a bit of it, and I did not run and get any today. But it will be on the docket for things for tomorrow. I just ran out today, actually, so okay, let me just tape this along the top here. And still going to have a little bit of work to do in terms of the curvature, just because I'm going to have a little bit of a buffer at the top and the bottom that I'm going to need to account for. But I think with the roof going on, that's going to be a little bit easier, and the bottom is going to be easy to make up because the bamboo skewers are going to come along there. So I'm just going to have to be a little bit careful with the run in the corners, and I may actually have to angle each other piece just slightly more to account for that. So it's going to be a little bit of a challenge, no doubt, for sure. Yeah, so let me just show you here on this camera. It's a little bit dark because the light is not quite there. So let me get out of the way, or I can show this way, I guess, here. So you can see how that's starting to follow the curvature. Let me just angle that. And then you guys can see how it's just going to change the profile of that a little bit. So each subsequent piece is going to basically follow the same design. What's going to ultimately end up happening, though, is it's going to have a little bit more of a run this way. So I'm going to have to account for the angle and maybe change it just a little bit to get a little bit more of a contour to the actual build. If I flex the pieces a little bit more as they glue, like so, that's going to actually account for that as well. So it's probably not going to be much of an adjustment, if any. I'm just going to have to make sure that when I put each piece on, I'm going to flex the plastic card just a little bit. I could also probably trim the bottom a little bit if I wanted to make up for that. But each piece, that's going to be the thing. I'm going to template all these out. So let me just see if I was estimating 3 does that much. 6, 9. I probably need about 13 pieces or so to go around. And when I'm laying them on, once I get the base template, each one is going to be able to be trimmed and manipulated. Given this plastic mold, maybe it's not 100% square flush all the way around. I'm going to want to make those small adjustments. Ultimately, it's not going to be too big of an issue. I'll make the adjustments top and bottom. As I said, this piece goes over the top there. So then we have the roof sort of accounting for that the top area, and then on the bottom area we have the platform. And so when we sandwich, again, really loose, when we sandwich all this together in this sort of conglomeration, let me cap that together, there we go, then it's going to end up being fairly flush. So you don't really see any yellow top and bottom. It's easy to account for. The overhead obviously is not going to show much, but I'll turn it like this so you guys can see it's fairly flush. It works out quite nicely. A little bit of math, a little bit of figuring, a little bit of finagling, and then we get it. This is really the crude structure. So if you just use your imagination for a second, really crappy weird structures, and then a little bit of work, and then they end up looking like this, a little bit more polished, a little bit more Wookiee-esque, if you will. This has just got some rudimentary colors. The reason that I have the base colors on here is because this gets affixed to the tree. Then I have to do all the bark work on the tree, and the bark is actually going to encapsulate some of this, kind of be growing over and around some of this. It's going to be dual purpose. One, it's going to be structural, and two, it's going to be a little bit of aesthetics, as I want to make sure that the growth of the tree really shows that these structures have been there for a long time, and they've really been kind of a part of the growth process. And so yeah, I mean, this is just a little bit more steps past this, and so that's what we're going to be working on in the coming weeks. So hopefully you guys are willing to kind of come back. You bear with me as I work through this. Typically I do just recorded videos, and then I edit and polish and put music, and it looks a little bit nicer than this. Live streaming is always just a little bit more candid, which I actually appreciate because it's a lot less work. But the interactivity that you guys have given me tonight, which is good. Some feedback, which is fantastic as well. So so bear with me. I'm going to continue working on this off camera. I'll probably be able to come back and do some live streaming. I'm really excited to get working on this platform. Truthfully, I'm really excited to get some things attached to the tree because I need to make that tree less pink and more wood like. And it's a little bit of a weird process because typically I will start with the biggest element and then add pieces to it. In this case, I actually have to build all the pieces that get added to the biggest element, and that being the trees. So how many windows, sorry, I'm just following up here. How many windows does the bowl each? How many windows does the bowl get? Okay, there we go. Sorry, I was misreading. Sure. I was getting it cut off there. So how many windows is the whole thing going to get? Each panel is going to get a window. So if it's 12 panels, it's going to be 12. If it's 13, it's going to be 13. So the model that I'm looking at has one window in each one. So I think that's going to split off quite nicely. I think they're a little bit of exaggerated size. They're also elevated up. So they'll probably go in the upper 1/3. So probably just a little bit. They got a little. Let me just quickly pen this out here. So what I'm seeing is. Let me just pull a panel back off here so I can actually sketch this out. Again, don't laugh at my drawing skills here. So what I'm kind of seeing is that the window is going to be sort of like this. There, and then it has this sort of kind of like an arch-like structure that kind of goes there. If this pen would draw on this plastic. You guys picking that up in the overhead? I'll show you in a second. So it's got this arch-like structure, and it's got kind of like these lines. And so we'll do that with small plastic card strips there, and then it has these three other sort of larger strips that go around the outside. So that window might extend down just a touch more. So let me just show you this here, Martin. There we go. All right, so this is in the light. I'll show you the 22 mil one here. So what ends up happening is the window goes in the upper third. It's got these sort of these arch-like strips that go across the top, and then these three sort of like metallic brassy bands that rip around the whole outside. So we'll do this with a plastic card strip, something more rectangular in shape, quite flush. The strips at the very top, I don't know if we'll be able to put much banding on there. I do have some small stripping that I might be able to include on there. If not, I might actually try to find a textured paper that I can cut more of a panel piece to do that. So we'll have a look at that. And then in between each of the panels, there's actually like this piece of cladding. So it'll be it'll probably end up being a little bit thicker than the banding that goes here, just so that we can hide the banding, and it will also be something that we can hide these seams with. What we'll actually probably end up doing is we'll probably accentuate the seam and cut that piece of banding in two, and so it'll still have a seam running up it, but it will be a little bit more of a molding as opposed to an actual seam between two panels. So when you're looking at this stuff, and again, this is one of the pieces of terrain making that often gets overlooked, and it doesn't frustrate me to any extent or not, but sometimes people will look at something and they don't see all the small pieces, or you just sort of glance at it and you're like, that's really neat. But when you really pay attention and you deep dive into stuff, like I'm hoping at the end of this I can tell a story where I will tell somebody that this hut at the top of this tree is built out of a dog food dish, and then have a really tough time convincing them that it actually is. And if I've done my job right, then it should not look like a dog food dish at all in the end. Hopefully this doesn't look like a stove cover anymore. That should all be well hidden. I assure you that there is a chef with grapes and a frying pan underneath here. I don't know if I have any of those laying around. As a matter of fact, I think I do. there you go. So this is how this started. So, so one of the fascinating things about terrain making, especially when you're able to, not just put a model kit together. Not that there's not a lot of skill involved in there, it totally is, but it's really neat when you can kind of convert things like this into something like this, and then have it look. When somebody looks at it, they say, "Oh, that looks like a Kashyyyk platform, or that looks like a Kashyyyk tree, or that looks like a Wookiee house, or that looks like something from episode 2." Instead of that looks like a stove cover, or that looks like a dog food dish. So it's one of the cool challenges, unique challenges. I'm up for it. It does take quite a bit of work. Quite a bit of time, but it's enjoyment as well for me. So that'll probably be it for me here in the Terrain Studio, folks. I've been your host, Sean Morris. If you want to check out the Patreon, it's just the Terrain Studio. However you find Patreon stuff, I'm not sure if it's like /Patreon. I think it's www.patreon.com/the Terrain Studio. I think that's how you find it. You can also find my page on Facebook if you want to follow me there. I also do a podcast, Legion Academy. It's right here. It's Tuesdays, and we do Friday fights as well. No Friday fights right now with the COVID-19 scenario, but you guys can check out all that cool content. It's Star Wars Legion related, so if you're here and you don't follow Star Wars Legion, that's perfectly fine as well. We do lots of other type of building, and you can apply all this stuff across lots of game systems as well. So that's it for me. I need to do some more templating here, and I will bring you guys back probably. I might even do some tomorrow, so I can probably catch up with me tomorrow, and hopefully I'll be a little bit farther along. For the next few days, I'll be working on this one piece, so if you're looking for any continuity in the actual videos, I will be focusing on this. Paneling first, then I'm going to be moving to the roof. I said I was going to show you the roof. I'll show you that tomorrow. I'm going to be moving the roof, then I'm going to be doing some skewer work on here. I'm also going to be doing some of the wrapping, so you guys will basically see all the elements that I have sort of scattered around here, the bamboo, the wrapping, the panel work, and I'll be doing all that on one large piece, and so hopefully you guys will be able to come back and check that out. And before long, we won't have any dog food dishes and funnels. We'll have, let's say, a Kashyyyk hut. So stay tuned, guys, and thanks again for watching. Catch you in the next video. Cheers.